we have our wonderful technician here, so he resolves everything. So I was telling that today, the day is consecrated, the first part of the day is consecrated to the description of the project's implementation, concerning mostly the presentation of the factual, let's say, aspect of this project, meaning the presentation of the quantitative data and of the qualitative data that we have elaborating in this first part of the project. As we are now finishing the basic research or the research, the field research in other terms, I think it is useful to have also your comments and remarks about the implementation of this research project. The project, let's say the descriptive part of the project will be presented by Manolis Arkolakis and also Michalis Saras and Antonis Antoniou. They're going to intervene, to intervene describing their part of concerning the basic research, and I will close with some the presentation of some methodological aspects of the project, meaning that during this session there is no analysis, let's say, of the subject matters that the data going to demonstrate us, but in the discussion we can open the field for this kind of of presentation. I mean, the thematical, a more specific presentation of the subject matters concerning the synthesis. In the second part of the day, we will have also a round table, and I hope that in this round table, in the first place, new research hypotheses are going to be formulated from all of us, or from the participants, having also in consideration your papers of yesterday. And I would like also to, as we discussed with Professor Sulfidis yesterday, I hope that you agree, everybody of you agrees, I would like to depend on the comparison aspect, and I will explain during the round table what I mean by comparison, meaning not a strictly comparison between areas or between geographical areas or historical periods, but mostly a conceptual one. So I will give now the floor to Manolis Arkolakis, which is a member of the research team, and he also teaches European history in the Hellenic Open University, not European history, mostly cultural studies and European history in the Hellenic Open University, and maybe it is it's worth saying that it was at the Hellenic Open University that we've met. It's about 20 years ago when I was also there teaching economic history. Manolis will present you the qualitative, let's say, data of this project. And as I said before, we are waiting also for your comments. Thank you very much.
Good morning. thank you for attending our meeting today. I would like to start reminding you that the Transmonia project, entitled Transnational Monetary and Economic Alternatives in the Interwar Politics, the 30th Greek crisis in the European context. It tends to analyze the Great Depression as a transition from the transnational to the regional. In particular, our research follows specific axes, starting from a global perception and concluding with the case studies. A listing of these axes in relation to the state of current research is as follows. Firstly, transnational monetary integration in interwar Europe and the turning point of the Great Depression. Geo-historical differentiations in the analysis of the interwar crisis. Southeastern Europe in the context of the interwar crisis. A microanalytical approach to the Greek interwar crisis. Monetary fluctuation and national accounts. And finally, visual representations of the Greek interwar crisis. In order to achieve the program's objectives, the work plan is structured around the above-mentioned thematic axis of the research objects, which correspond to and are structured in specific work packages. The title of these packages is the first package is Transnational Monetary Integration in Interwar Europe and the Point of the Great Depression. The second package is titled Geo-historical Differentiation in the Analysis of the Interwar Crisis. It's divided into subcategories. Rural Southeastern Europe in the context of the interwar crisis, and second, national cases, first Greece and secondly, Germany. The third package is titled A Microanalytical Approach to the Greek Interwar Crisis, also divided into subcategories. Firstly, monetary fluctuation and national accounts, and secondly, visual representations of the Greek interwar crisis. The first package will be, Katerina will be more specific in her speech, in her intervention, and also for the first subcategory of the second package, the rural Southeastern Europe in the context, will be more specific, will be analyzed specifically by Michalis, my colleague Michalis. So I'm focusing mainly on the 2.2 package, the national cases, especially about Greece. In addition to the already existing research of the modernization model implemented in Greece during the period 1928 to 1932, partly based on international capital mediated by the League of Nations, the Greek case is an example for the study of the model of economic rationalization adopted by the League of Nations. It also translates the prevailing economic ideas within the international institution and records the technocratic framework that has been applied in order for the decision taken in the international institutions to be disseminated at the state and regional level. The alteration in financial regularity introduced for Greece revealed with the bankruptcy of 1932 and the withdrawal of the link's regulatory role by the Greek side. Due to the international crisis and the sterling's departure from the gold exchange standard in 1931, the monetary stabilization policy achieved in 1928 was abandoned in 1932 when the country also declared a partial suspension of the payments of the external public and private debt. These points have been adequately studied in the Greek, but also in the international literature, for example, by Mazauer. Parallel to the demand for financial modernization and its introversion after the crisis arrival in Greece, it will be examined the actual payment of the Greek debt after 1932, which has not been incorporated into the Greek studies, despite the fact that these payments were recorded until the 1910s. As already noted, the articulation of the financial framework to the monetary indicator, as well as the evaluation of the Greek monetary policy during the period under examination, is expected to illuminate the objective dynamics of the Greek economy in the 30s, while it describes the position of Greece in the international distribution of capital and labor during the interwar period. By summarizing the aforementioned international economic processes, this research and the resulting synthetic work will explore the gradual diversification of national economic policy towards a centrally organized economy and the scope of the national market's expansion. Of course, this process was gradually implemented, ranging from the state protectionism of the early 30s to the state intervention of 1932 and thereafter. The transition to a more or less centrally organized economy with emphasis on the strengthening of agricultural production is also reflected on the institutional legal framework, which is a special research field in this proposal's acts. Additionally, the project will include the mapping of decision-making networks through their prosopographical and bibliographic imprint of the use of parliamentary sources. Now, that was the general approach of our project, the specific case. I'd like to focus on the Greek case, referring to specific research in some archives. For example, the work using archives of personal archives of political personalities like Eleftherios Venizelos, who was the prime minister during that period from 1928 to 1932, and Emmanuel Tsouderos, who was a politician and economist from 1926 to 1928. He was sub-director of National Bank of Greece, and later from 1928 to 1939 was at the beginning sub-director and then director of the Bank of Greece, newly established in 1928. Their correspondence is very useful and important on the research work, working on these archives, and also working at the archives of Bank of Greece, and correspondence concerns with the political and diplomatic processes in relation to the economic and monetary policy of the Greek state. The recomposition of the correspondence of the two personalities allows the examination of specific aspects of this historical period that coincides with the international economic crisis and its effects on the Greek economy. It also allows to clarify elements of the political choices of the Venizelos governments, as well as the institutional role of the newly established Bank of Greece. The result of this research was the creation of specific database, a big one database, where we concentrated the whole correspondence, the existed correspondence of Venizelos and Tsudaros. That correspondence, as I said, was scattered between various archives. So we have now the whole correspondence in one body for the use, the data of this correspondence for the use of the program. Another result of this research was the writing of a specific paper about the process of researching the correspondence of the two political personalities. I'm going now to speak specifically about how we use the data and how we disseminate the data we collected during the first part of our research. Mainly, we use the website of the program, but unfortunately, the website we have only the Greek version for the time being, but for this reason, I'll try to explain a few things about the structure of our website, and I'm going to show you the map of the English version of the site. Which is this one. The version, this is the various categories of the website of our program. The first category, the central category, is the description of the program, Transmona, program description, contact, host institution, cooperate institutions, news events, and links. The second category is human resources, information about the head of research, scientific team members, cooperative members, and external cooperative members. The third category is research data, quantitative data, which is divided to public finance and agricultural economy, parliamentary sources, which is divided to the demos data base and financial legislation. Then the visual sources divided into indexes of various visual sources and materials, and then materials and index sites. The next category is bibliography, a general bibliography about the crisis at that period, bibliography of Greek history of the interwar period, bibliography of rural history of Southeastern Europe, various sources like government gazette, ethnographic data sources. And then we have dissemination, which is the various seminars. Already we finished the first thematic circle, and now we are during the second thematic circle. Katerina will speak, will say a few things about this. the various conferences and events. Finally, we have the category of publications, which includes working papers and presentations, scientific articles, the future monograph and collective volumes, the result of the synthesis of the whole research, and miscellaneous and various announcements. I'm focusing for the reason of today's presentation to research data in order to show you the various database created by the research in the various fields according to the working packages which already spoken. The first part is about quantitative data, which includes the subcategory of public finance, entitled in general the creation of a data series of the Greek economy 1928-1939. Here we have 4 databases using the data from the Supreme Economic Council, indexes of national economy, indexes of secondary production, financial data and indexes, and also financial data. Although this research, is in this database is in Greek, I'll show you a few examples. Few examples of the database we've already created. Our colleague Adonis will speak more specifically about this database of the Supreme Economic Council. So another database is exchange rates and local prices, index of 2 local newspapers from Patras, the city of Patras, specifically. I show you the database in the previous. And then the next subcategory is agricultural economy with the indexes and quantitative data. Next, I'd like to say a bit more about the next category, the parliamentary materials. For the parliamentary materials, we created a database called Demos, which is about the decision making on a national level, parliamentary debates, and participative political subjects. For the time being, Demos is not uploaded, but we have already uploaded the content of minutes volumes of the Greek Parliament that were studied at the and indexed for the compilation of the Demos database for the period 1927-1935. Although it sounds a bit strange why we have to compose content of minis. Unfortunately, even the content was very difficult to combine at the beginning of the research, although these materials are digitized, but years ago, that's why it was a bit mess, the whole thing. So the data we examined the volumes, the minutes volumes of the Greek Parliament, collecting especially the debates, the discussions about economic crisis, stabilization, agricultural economy, gold exchange, exchange rates. In general, every discussion in the parliament about economy specific related to the economic crisis. Using this database, which, as I've told, is already ready but not uploaded, we'll use this database for various indexes. So the first one is an index about persons and international organizations which are referred during these discussions, persons who participate in these discussions, politicians, but also economists and other international figures who participate, who are involved in all these debates. I'll show you. This is the database of the person and organizations, international organizations, according the minutes of the parliament. Finally, I'm going to speak for the third package, especially for visual representations. In visual representations, we mean that we are researching for any kind of visual representation related to the crisis. That means work of arts, photographs, and films during the interwar period. Already, we finished the first database of the film materials produced in Greece relating to the crisis. Not only journals and non-fictional material, but also few fictional fiction films which are directly related to the crisis. Where in the process, we are working on the construction of the database of the work of art, specific works of art, and also various photographs related to the social conditions in Greece at that time, also relating to the rural economy, focusing especially on tobacco sector, grains, and wheat. And also, we are going to combine a database with photographs, selected photographs about the social mobilization and the conflicts between the social conflicts in Greece, specifically at that time, especially from 1932 to 1936. This is in general the a very brief introduction of the I'm going to conclude my presentation answering the question why we are concerned with visual representations. Although other European countries and the US have explored the visual representation of the international interwar crisis, Greece has not yet made use of the rich primary material. By examining visual representations, we will attempt an alternative interpretation of the Greek interwar crisis in its social dimension. In the sense that questions arise as to how the effects of the crisis are depicted in photos, films, and artworks. At the same time, we will collect the relevant photographs, materials that lies scattered, and we will examine it as a particular narrative expression in order to show the levels of reception of the time and how it contributes to shaping the subsequent memory in the current social conditions and the experience of the current crisis. The abundant material of newsreels will also form the basis to discussing the dominant narrative about the impact of the crisis and the efforts to overcome it. This analysis will comparatively present the visual narratives along with the corresponding European examples, which have also a model for the Greek filmmakers and the state institutions that financed the production of the relevant visual material. Thank you very much. And Michalis will explain the specific package, as I said before. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Manolis and Katerina. My work package is work package 2.1 in the Transmonian project for national and transnational histories. The title of my work package is Southeastern Europe in the context of the interwar crisis. The main sources which were identified for those in the process of investigation derived from the League of Nations and the Royal Institute of International Affairs, as well as other sources active in the interwar years and presenting quantitative data. The publications of the League of Nations provide quantitative data for every facet of the economic affairs of the interwar period regarding the countries of Southeastern Europe, but applying broadly throughout Eastern Europe. Those were used for the preparation and completion of the final product of this project. For instance, the article of the collective volume entitled Challenging Modernity, International Agrarianism in the Interwar Period. So we made a report crisis for the evaluation of quantitative sources. And we also made a bibliographic base with secondary sources, books, report of other international institutions on the interwar economic crisis in Greece and southeastern Europe. Summary conclusions stemming from the evaluation of quantitative sources. The countries of southeastern Europe, Balkans, were mostly rural during the interwar period. Mainly, they exported agricultural products and raw materials and imported industrial goods. Even if they did not participate dynamically in the international trade of the time, still their economy suffered during the Great Recession. The price of the agricultural products they exported fell drastically during the crisis. Greece exported mainly tobacco and raisins. Bulgaria exported grain and tobacco, Romania grain and timber, Yugoslavia grain, livestock and timber. The reduced export prices were widely disproportionate to the industrial products those countries imported, primarily from Western Europe, Germany, Great Britain and Italy, and secondarily from Central Europe, Austria and Czechoslovakia. Their societies still struggled to heal the wounds of World War I and integrated economically and socially the millions of refugees who fled to them as a result of the wider geopolitical alignments in the region. The crisis of 29 added new problems extremely difficult to address through ordinary measures. Besides a reduction in income for both cities and rural areas, the international recession differed according to region or country. The recession either canceled or delayed the process of modernization which had begun before the interwar period, albeit in a limited pace. Typically, wherever the commercialization of agricultural products disrupted the traditional means of production, the effects of the crisis were more severe. Traditional means refer to self-consumption, exchanges in kind, customary organizational structures. Commercialization of agricultural production, urbanization, and revenues from abroad varied from country to country. Revenues from abroad typically meant remittances from emigrated individuals and other sources. Greece balanced its permanent trade deficit to a great degree through revenues from abroad. Immigrant remittances, shipping, capital investments of emigrated Greeks, tourist income. Any significant sources of undisclosed revenues did not exist in other Balkan countries. Declining incomes and the consequent disruption of the ever-slow course of modernization was one of the factors leading to autocratic and dictatorial political developments. For example, in Greece in 1936, the Metaxas dictatorships, in Bulgaria 1935, in Romania 1938. The shift to domestic production and the self-sufficiency policies were forced solutions destined to fail, given the slow industrial development, the lack of infrastructure, and the inadequate training of the workforce. Eventually, failure to sell at satisfactory prices the agricultural products of the region in international markets led to bilateral clearing agreements, principally with Germany. This was the prelude of the devastating period of the German occupation a few years later. To a significant degree, the course of the countries of the region was predetermined during the interwar years and the Great Recession. The region fell behind the great changes of the first phase of internationalization of the economy, 1870-1914. The subsequent war events and the repercussions caused economic chaos and social disintegration. In any case, I deem that a historical recourse into the 19th century and perhaps earlier would enlighten the understanding of the socio-economic developments of the Balkan countries in the aforementioned period. Thank you.
Thank you, Michalis, for this presentation. Normally, we had to give the floor at Andonis, but as there is a technical problem, I will present um, his PowerPoint. It's his PowerPoint, not mine. It's about the quantitative data that he elaborates in the framework of the project. Meaning it's the microanalysis from the quantitative point of view. So his specific, let's say, duties. Okay. We have technical problems. I don't know why, but we'll try to manage. Okay. Now I think we are okay. Please, Manon. You can hear me? I think it's okay now. So Antonis, he's working on the microanalysis, let's say, of the Greek crisis, and he's elaborating the sources that Manolis has already mentioned, meaning we are constructing the databases on the Supreme Economic Council that we have already discussed yesterday via via the presentation of Matthias. So Antonis is working on that source, and also he collected data on exchange rates by local newspapers that give us a feedback what's going on in the market, meaning other than the official exchange rates from the Bank of Greece. Of course, this is not the case for the period of stabilization, as the during 1828 to 18 in the mid until the mid 1932, the exchange rate of the sterling is, of course, as you know, stable because of the stabilization. But via this source, the local press, he can have a review, overall review of the market prices from 1923 onwards, which is, of course, connected to the defeat, the Greek defeat in the Asian Minor expedition, military expedition. I mean, the devaluation, the great devaluation that we remark in the early 20s. In the Greek case, it is connected with the Greco ex-Ottoman war, and not with the First World War. So he sees this cyclical, let's say, movement of the exchange rates in Greece. So, sorry. It is one technical problem again. So in the first place, Adonis examines the cost evaluation of the refugee settlement via the statistical, via the data of the statistical, of the Greek statistics of the period, of the Greek Statistical Service. And as a axe of the project, I need to add that this specific research, I mean the quantitative valorization of the refugee settlement in the project, it is connected with the agency of the international institutions and especially of the League of Nations in Greece as concern this refugee population. So we are trying to combine the data, the numbers with qualitative sources, which is an important indicator for this period concerning this population. Of course, for me, it would be very good, very great. It would be great actually if I could find data also for the Turkish, for the population that had to leave Greece and go to Turkey, to the new state of Turkey. So far, I have one or two articles. I found one or two articles in the bibliography, but the statistical data on the Turkish case are not very. We're not having. I don't have such any information, and I know that the relevant literature by Turkish colleagues are in Turkey. So we will try to learn some Turkish, but I'm not sure. So maybe a perspective could be also to combine the Greek case with the Turkish case. I have some elements for my own topics about the construction of rurality, let's say in Turkey, as the same policies of rural modernization were applied by Venizelos in the 20s and by Kemal in Turkey. And I think that is because of the influence of the international institution. I mean, there are models, we know also from the case of Syria, there are models applied in the cases of refugee settlement, rural, of course, refugee settlement by the international institution. So we have two parts. Andonis works on the quantitative aspect of the refugee settlement, as you can see here in his PowerPoint. I work on the qualitative aspects and on the agency of the international institutions as concern the rural, mostly refugee settlement in Greece and the interconnection with the loans that Greece received in 1924 and 1928 by the financial committee of the League of Nations. And we just seen the case of, and yesterday also, the case of Bulgaria with the international borrowing of the 20s from the League of Nations and for the same reasons. Andonis also works on the social spending, I mean the state's expenditure and the refugees. As you maybe know, there are, or as I have to explain, there are two kinds of investment as concern the refugee settlement. In the first place, the international investments, as I already explained, and in the second place, the state's investments that Andonis examines, as you can see here, which are destined which are state investments so as to fund the urban establishment of the refugees. So we have two kinds of refugee settlement and two kinds of investment regarding the establishment of refugees. And I must say that those questions are not explored really are not excessively explored until today by the Greek economic history. So I think that this is an innovation of our research. So Adonis also works on the social expenses and the percentage of the social expenses at the total of his sources, and he does comparisons in long term. You can see his table here, and maybe he can explain to us after the presentation of his PowerPoint. He can explain to us more things about the findings about his findings concerning the long-term comparisons of social expenses in Greece, of course. On the other hand, as Manolis had already explained, via the Supreme Economic Council, we are, even if it was not in the first place in the targets of our project, we are focusing on the agricultural data produced by the Supreme Economic Council. So with Adonis Formate under my we collaborate so as to evaluate this data, and then he created the data series. We focus on the agricultural domain, as Greece at the time was a purely agricultural country. 60% of the active population was occupied in agricultural domain. So I thought that it was very interesting, very important to create serial data on agricultural domain from the data of the Supreme Economic Council. In this point, it must be said that the data of the House of the Supreme Economic Council are collected and elaborated at the time according to the protocols of the statistical protocols of the League of Nations. I mean, the model is exactly the same. And as I demonstrated yesterday, during from the early 20s until the late 30s, countries were obliged to collect data and send them to the statistical offices, services of the League of Nations in order to create the global, let's say, statistical, in order the League of Nations creates the global statistical series. And maybe it must be said that even under the Great Depression, as the research of Roger already demonstrated, during the Great Depression, the League of Nations continues to collect statistical data in this uniform procedure. And maybe Roger afterwards would like to add a word. As I said, Andonis creates the serial, um, ser- um, a serial representation of of the rural Greek economy of the 30s. And also he uses the indicators of the Supreme Economic Council in order to describe the industrial development and the development of the sector of services in the late 20s and the early and all the destiny, all the 30s. And so we have a complete image, a complete SEMA about the developments in these sectors also. And it must be said that, yes, the data demonstrates expansion of the Greek economy, but we have to take into consideration, as Lefteri said also yesterday, and I said it also, we have to take into consideration the per capita GDP, and in the second place, which is my nomen, let's say, mostly, the monetary factor, as drachma is 40% evaluated during this period, and most of the data of the Supreme Economic Council, it's not in stabilized drachmas, it's in drachmas, πώς το λένε, τρέχουσα. What? It's not in constant drachmas, but in τρέχουσες drachmas. Currently, sorry, I have a blackout because it's with all these technical problems I have also. So this is a factor that we have to take into consideration. You can see here in Donny's PowerPoint his work about the his indicators on the tertiary sector. And of course, via his research, via the analysis, the quantitative analysis of the states data, we are passing in another level. He tries to describe the impact of the local impact of the Great Depression in Greece, and his main shares, continuing research already begun before this project. For his research, his basic sources are the reports, the annual reports of the state. I need to, okay, this is a remark that I wanted to make, and is correlated with the modernization of the Greek state that Matthias referred already yesterday. In 1928, the Greek state published his records from the 19th century onwards, meaning that the reports of the state were not institutionally official, and in the framework of the modernization in 1928, they were ratified by the Greek parliament. Of course, in my opinion, this is also a part of the procedure to manage, to currencies, to drachmas stabilization. And of course, Greece had to adapt to the directives of the international institutions, so they had also to ratify their reports. And as Adonis research demonstrated concerning the source, also this abnormality as concerns the publication, the ratification of the 30s reports continues also in the 30s. I mean, we have a normality, an instant normality in 1928, but after that, the abnormality as concerns the ratification of the official reports of the state continues, and of course during the metaxas period, as Andonis research demonstrated. So you can see here how he works uh, on the series, how he formats his series from the national accounts, combining them to the data of the state's report. Another aspect of Antonis' problematic is how development policy it is reflected in national accounts, as we said yesterday, which is not, of course, a Greek a Greek exception, but I think that it is in use for the whole continental, let's say, Europe, Balkans, and I think Eastern Europe also, and France, of course. During the 30s, we have an expansion of the public works, which is, of course, reflected in the national accounts. So the expenditure of the state concerning public investments or public works is also elaborated by Andonis in his Syriac elaboration, let's say. And of course, via this element, via this data, we can understand, we can observe that during the 30s, we have the implementation of the protectionist policy. So not only matters of the currency, but also in matters of state expenditure as concerns as regards public works. So another aspect of our research, and this I will present. Now I'm trying to gain some time, and I am presenting in the same time the Andonis work, let's say, and the principal research hypothesis concerning the examination of the Greek case. So I am presenting also a bit my own research in this project. So the public debt, it is described, of course, via the reports of the state, and Andonis collected the annual service of the debt. On the other time, I found the qualitative sources like those I demonstrated yesterday from the Bank of France provided me some evidence on the payments, annual payments of the 19th century debt, Greek debt, after the bankruptcy of 1932. Because as we know, I think Matthias said it also yesterday, the Greek public debt was under negotiation after the bankruptcy of 1932. But the debt, the public debt in gold, as I said yesterday, was served normally after the bankruptcy of 1932, and the payments of the Greek state to the International Commission were uh, were uh, were normal. So from this archival material of the International Commission for the Greek debt, we construct some data series on the payments for the service of of the debt in gold after the Greek bankruptcy. In the same time, I have also evidence for from qualitative sources from the Bank of France always about the negotiations of the Greek state with its creditors in London during the 30s and especially during the Metaxas period, which are rather interesting material to study. And in my opinion, it is not only um, an example for the Greek history, but also material so as to study the functioning of international institutions in the 30s. Because it must be said, the Commission of, of Lenders was also a part of the League of Nations structure. So it's not only a committee of private creditors, but it has also an institutional role also connected to the League of Nations. So it is a global paradigm, and it's not only a paradigm of the Greek national history. Last but not least, this was a major part of Andoni's work concerning the collection of data. And Manolis had already demonstrated before in his presentation how Adonis elaborated two local newspaper in order to create series not only of exchange rates, as I said in the first place, but also of local prices, which is a very important topic for Greek economic history and especially for the Greek rural history as inventor invent the sense the collection of the data concerns the price of resin, which was of course a commercial product and has its own role in the gestioning of the Great Depression in Greece, as it was mostly exported, of course. And because of the problems with the international trade of the resin and the parallel taxation of the Greek state to its cultivators, we have, I think, in the agricultural space, in the agricultural territory, important manifestation in Peloponnesus during the early 30s, precisely because of the problems the cultivators had to sell their resins, and because of the taxation that was in any case imposed to the cultivators of the resin. This social index, I mean the demonstration, it's an indicator for us to see that in fact in Greece we have some social protestation in the rural space during the interwar period and especially during the Great Depression. And this also, it is not very, very elaborated from the Greek rural history. Uh, I hope that in the near future we are also doing some research on that and in the visual, in the part or in the section of the visual representation, but also as a contribution to the Conference of Rural History in Uppsala this year. But I hope that this part of research will be more explored by young researchers in Greece. It's very, I mean, it's important because this one is connected with what happened to the Mediterranean Europe. I think, and if I am wrong, you can correct me. But I think it's connected with what it happened to Mediterranean Europe, in Italy or in Spain, of course, in a degree a lot more intensive than in Greece. And also we have, by studying also the and repertoire indexing the legislation about the zestioning of rural economy in the 30s. We remark that in the contrast of what Greek literature says, we have taxation and important taxation of farmers during that period, which, as I said, was also at the cause of the rural protests during the 30s. So, as you understand, until you may, I hope that you understand until now, we are trying to combine qualitative elements to quantitative elements and to statistical and archival and legislative sources to statistical sources. So this is, let's say, methodological challenge of the project. And for this reason, we enlarge our research in domains that in the first place they were not included in the financed, in the funded, sorry, project. So as you can see here in Andoni's PowerPoint, he describes with details his work as concerns the state policy concerning exchange rates and resins and the price of the resins a partir from the elaboration of these two newspapers, local newspapers, in the mid-term. So, concluding as concerns the quantitative data, that it's the field of the working package. Let's use the terminology of the project. So this is the working package of Adonis concerning the microanalysis of the Greek economy, but also it's not other than a microanalysis. It is in fact a multi-sectorial analysis of the Greek economy, trying to combine to record, let's say, public finances, the production of the main export products, the main commercial products, and of course the exchange rates at national and local level. It must be added, Andonis does not have it in his PowerPoint, but I would like to add that also, which is a real innovation for the Greek economic history. It is the fact that he records expenses, state's expenditure and state's income in local level from the data of the local treasuries. And this, we hope that it will give us an axis so as to analyze the peripheral distribution, let's say, of the state's expenditure in parallel to demographic factors and in and I suppose a phase after the completion of the project in a third then place to combine them with the agricultural revenue. This, I think it is the research on peripheral data and on the data of the local states treasuries. It is an innovation that can give new or can open new horizons to the Greek economic history. I tried to combine so far the presentation of Antonis concerning his work with some of the research hypotheses concerning the Greek manifestation, the Greek, the, yes, the Greek aspect. I like to see it like that, the Greek aspect of the Great Depression. So this is the presentation of Manolis. This quantitative presentation, let's say, of the quantitative aspects, and this presentation of work, my own research in the project concerning the Greek economic history. It is the one facet of the project, the other being the role of the international institutions in regulation of global monetary circulation in the first place during the 20s and the 30s, and the global impact of the Great Depression on these transnational arrangements. As I said yesterday, and in a way I repeat it today, and that's also demonstrated in her research about the statistical the statistical data, the collecting of global statistical data by the League of Nations. We can remark that even the predominance of protectionism during the 30s, although the international institutions played a role until the end of the 30s or the beginning of the 40s. For a case study of this, let's say, of the agency of international institutions as concern their interference in local level, I study yesterday I said more about that. Today I will only refer this topic of research. I am my research, and one aspect of my research focuses on the settlement, on the rural settlement of refugees in Greece as funded by the Financial Committee of the League of Nations, as implemented partially by the Office Autonome, the autonomous office of the refugee settlement in the 20s, and in the third place as an example for the implementation of global policies in local level. In earlier research, before the construction, the formation of this project, I study, and now I can combine these two aspects. I studied the the associative organization like cooperatives created in the northern Greece because of or after the refugee settlement. And so I can combine those were at the time, of course, not autonomous organization, but mostly centralized states a movement under the auspice of the state. So we can combine via this paradigm the role of the global actors and the local agents in a defined area. And this is another, and I will finish with that because I think that we have said too much. I will finish with the comment that in our project we are trying to combine analysis of the local conditions with the global regulation of economy during the 20s and the 30s. In the same time, there is a theoretical, in my own research, there is a theoretical issue about the role of money in the gestioning or in the preparation of the Great Depression during the 20s. So thank you very much. I combine the two presentations because of the technical problem of Adonis with the PowerPoint, but I think with mine present, I combined two of them. So I think we gain some time. So I don't know if you would like to ask something or to comment on our, let's say, research, our implementation of this research project. And any feedback, maybe?